courage to go up to important people and question the way that they're leading their lives, you might be able to find surprising inadequacies of which their very confident demeanour gave absolutely no indication. The second reason we may hesitate to challenge other people is that we all know in our calmer moments how easy it is to make trouble for the wrong reasons, because we're feeling pig-headed or bloody-minded. Socrates was a nonconformist, and he made trouble for Athenians. But he wasn't motivated by an arrogant wish that everyone should do things his way, nor by the kind of willful eccentricity we might think of when we hear that he went around barefoot and never washed his cloak. What makes his nonconformity valuable is that it was motivated by the desire to find the truth and challenge lazy assumptions, rather than the wish to make trouble. So this is roughly what Socrates would do. He'd walk down the main streets in the marketplace of Athens and go up to people and ask them large questions about the meaning of life, which is, in a way, a very fascinating thing to do and also a very irritating thing to do. If you ask people to explain their beliefs, they'll tend to react with aggression a lot of the time. We'll see what happens here. Excuse me, can you tell me, what do you think justice is?
That's a little hard to say.
It is. It's a good question.
I guess just making sure that everyone gets what is right and fair for them.
Excuse me, can I just ask you a question? What do you think justice is? Parlez français?
Oui.
La justice. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez que la justice? Going up to people and asking them to explain their beliefs is pretty scary if you're at all shy, like me. People look at you strangely. They imagine that if you ask them to explain why they're living in a certain way, that you know the answer, and are in some way claiming a position of superiority over them.
Non. Les philosophes grecs, ça vous intéresse?
Je connais pas trop la région, donc je suis en vacances, donc voilà.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
The French, who is supposedly the most philosophical nation, seem to be scoring very low on our Socratic test here, but we'll see what happens next. Socrates had no such inhibitions. He preferred to be thought a bit over-intense and weird than allow his fellow citizens to continue to muddle along unthinkingly. He wanted all of us to scrutinize what we believed, even on our way to the shops. Excuse me, sir. Can I just ask you, what do you think the good life is?
No, he doesn't know.
As you can probably imagine, Socrates annoyed a lot of Athenians in this way. But at the heart of his approach is an extremely egalitarian idea that everyone has the duty to reflect on their life, and that we are all surprisingly capable of doing so.
You have to be in order to be happy.
You need to have fun. You need to have people that love and care about you, and people to love and care.
We're not often expected to explain why we live the way we do. Socrates asks us to overcome our laziness and timidity, to work out what we really think, and stand by it once we have.
What do you think self-control is?
You're talking to the right person.
Self-control, being able to say what you mean at exactly the right time and get your message across.
Philosophy, in his hands, is an invitation open to us all to intelligent nonconformity.
We just think we're philosophers.
Why? What makes you philosophers?
Socrates doesn't just give us the confidence to challenge prevailing ideologies, beliefs and traditions. He also offers us a way to develop beliefs of our own, which can help us to strike out from the crowd. And the way to do so is to put them through a rigorous test which he devised. If our opinions can survive Socrates' test, then they will truly be worth standing up for. The reason why there are a lot of woolly or at least imprecise ideas out there in the world is that many people imagine that you can come up with a good idea without thinking too hard about it. Socrates thought this was crazy, and to bring out the insanity of this position, compared thinking to potting. And no one would imagine that you could make a good pot without at least following some pretty rigorous steps. And yet many people imagine that you could come up with a good ethical idea, an idea on how to live your life, without thinking too hard about it. Socrates went further in his analogy. He actually came up with a distinct method, a Socratic method of thought. He identified 5 distinct steps which anyone who wanted to come up with a good thought would have to follow in order to do so. And these thoughts can roughly be summarised as follows. Firstly, look around you for statements that many people would describe as plain common sense. For example, that the best jobs are those which are most highly paid, or that happiness comes from being married. Secondly, try and find an exception to this. Could you ever be married and yet unhappy? Or could you ever be in a very well-paid job and yet miserable? Thirdly, if an exception to this statement is found, it must mean that your statement is false or at least imprecise. And in this case, we find that there is an imprecision. Fourthly, try to nuance the initial statement to take the exception into account. So in our example, realise that it is possible to be quite unhappy in a very highly paid job if it's completely creatively unfulfilling, or to be quite miserable in a marriage if you've married the wrong person. Lastly, you continue this process for as long as possible. You keep trying to find exceptions to your common sense statement. And Socrates said that the truth, insofar as anyone's ever able to reach the truth, lies in a statement which it seems impossible to disprove. If we test our opinions in this way, Socrates believed, we'll be able to construct trustworthy and watertight thoughts, in just the same way as a skilled potter makes trustworthy and watertight pots. The point of Socrates' method is that it makes you far less passive, less inclined to follow the other sheep. If other people disagree, we don't just have to say, limply or petulantly, well, I think I'm right, but I can't tell you why. We'll be able to demonstrate logically why we believe things, and if others ignore the logic, then their opposition won't have to unnerve us so badly. Most of us imagine that we can't be philosophers because we haven't studied philosophy, we haven't read enough, we haven't gone to school long enough, we haven't done a university degree. And I think what I find extremely inspiring in Socrates is the idea that everyone can think. And not just everyone can think, but everyone has a responsibility to think. As he famously put it, the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates made the idea of an examined life seem far from forbidding. Socrates suggests that we can have an interesting philosophical conversation anywhere, even on a street corner. Philosophy needn't just happen behind the walls of a university or in a schoolroom. Socrates used to talk to an extraordinary range of people and liked to demonstrate to them that they were all able to arrive at well-thought-out opinions. It's an inspiring idea. However, in our modern democratic societies, where focus groups and opinion pollsters rule, Socrates would have thought that our problem is that we tend to listen to opinions whether they're well thought out or not.
There's too much risk involved with that.
Although Socrates believed that we were all, in theory, capable of living an examined life, he knew that in practice most of us don't. And this meant that he couldn't accept that every opinion was equally worth listening to, any more than that every pot